postpone. Very simply, you asked to do certain things at the last meeting before this was continued.
Yeah, please.
Thank you.
I'm coming here.
We have two.
People having trouble hearing you. I don't know what we're going to do. All I can suggest, this is not a good room for acoustics, as you. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but your reference to having us roll is, we are a zoning board of appeals. The issue before us is a zoning issue, frankly, an interpretation of our zoning ordinance. It frankly is a very narrow issue. The issue is not about the social benefits, the societal benefits of beekeeping. That is whether right or wrong, that is a policy matter. That is not something that we as a zoning board decide. Policy is decided by the city council. The city council adopts the zoning ordinance, which sets forth the zoning policy of the city, and amends it from time to time. And is free to adopt separate ordinances, like a bee ordinance, that I believe Somerville, as for one community, has. So, to the extent we have speeches tonight about the societal benefits of beekeeping, or even the safety, I'm going to cut the discussion off like that, because that is not before us tonight. What is before us, as I said, is a matter of zoning policy. As I said also, the city council adopts the ordinance. We interpret that ordinance. We also have the power to grant variance from the ordinance, but the petitioner has not sought a variance, and so that is not before us tonight. So what is the issue under the ordinance? It's very clear. The zoning ordinances, Cambridge's as well as other communities, among other things, regulate the uses that people can put to their property. In Cambridge's case, we have a table of uses. It goes on for 10 pages, very small print, enumerating many uses of potential uses of property. And then the ordinance says, zoning district by zoning district, this is permitted with conditions, this is not permitted. Then there, after this, or not after, actually before, but in connection with this table of uses, we have a very simple section in our ordinance. It is section 4.13. And it says, and I'm going to read it because it is short and it's very straightforward. No building, structure, or land in any district may be used, erected, or designed to be used in whole or in part for any use not listed in section 4.30. Section 4.30 is the table of uses. And then there's an exception for non-conforming items, which is not relevant here. So if it's not in the table of uses, it is by section, per the literal language of 4.13, it is not permitted under our zoning ordinance. That leads to why the case is here tonight. A complaint was raised by a neighbor to the Inspectional Services Department that these bees were maintained and not in compliance with Cambridge regulations. Mr. O'Grady checked out the table of uses and could find nothing. He could find nothing in the table of uses that dealt with beekeeping. He went further, which is I think salutary, and tried to see if there's any analogous situation that he could fit these under, arguably should be fit under. Things that came to mind were livestock, agriculture, but there's nothing in the ordinance that deals with that as well. And in that, the reference in his letter stating that there's been a violation of the ordinance made reference to livestock, but that's the context of the reference. So, his conclusion was, nothing in the ordinance in the table of uses that deals with beekeeping. Therefore, pursuant to section 4.13, this beekeeping is not allowed. Not a matter of policy, not a matter of right or wrong. That's what the ordinance says. And that decision was reached, and the petitioner has taken an appeal of that decision. And that's the issue before us tonight. The interpretation of our ordinance is not about the social utility of beekeeping or the benefits of society. And then, again, one more time, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, take those arguments to the city council. They're the ones who can make that decision, and should make that decision, frankly. But we don't. We just take the ordinance that they've given us and we interpret it. End of speech. The floor is yours again.
We have no intention of going into the benefits of beekeeping, as it's obvious. We do want to articulate our opposition to the Inspectional Services order and the reasons for it very briefly. We would like to relate to you what the relationship to the community has been, as your suggestion, to talk to the neighbors and see what's happening there. The congregation wants very much to be a good neighbor. We're not intent of antagonizing anybody, and so the arguments that were raised, the big arguments were, number one, that it was not livestock, as the chairman said, it's catch-all kind of thing. Our argument is that if it's not specifically excluded, then it's not covered. That may or may not be the result. There are other exceptions to schools, religious institutions, and so on. And obviously, we're not going to go into those things at this point. There's also something which we did not impress, which we just want to mention, is that there's, no matter what the ordinance says, no matter what the permit is, if the activity constitutes a nuisance, you can shut it down. It's always possible to do that. What we're here to do is to report on what the chair asked us to do, is to talk to the neighbors. We also then want to hopefully have somebody answer what we think it's bad policy. I'll put my own. We think it's bad policy to do anything based upon fear or ignorance or whatever. So we want to be able to have someone answer questions that people have them as to the fact. The decision, whatever the decision the board makes, we're going to abide by it. Just that simple. I hope I speak for the. So may I introduce Rabbi Liza Stern, who is the rabbi and the head of Congregation H. Chaim, who I think can respond to explain what's happening. Well, I want her to be able to talk to the
No, I'm
You
good.
got a seat up there.
Oh, yeah.
I'm good, and I'm used to speaking loudly. At the meeting in November, you invited us to attempt to have a conversation with our neighbors to clarify any misunderstandings. The reason why we have the apiary inspector of Massachusetts here, and why we have Dr. Noah Wilson-Rich here, is because it was our belief and our assumption, actually, that when people were educated about the bees, it would help them feel more comfortable with the hives. We are totally respect the fact that bees are frightening to people. And frankly, since I've been around bees for so many years, I forgot that bees can be alarming, that honeybees can be alarming. And I'm aware that many people don't know that honeybees are not aggressive and that they're not going to chase after you and sting you. And so having people who are in the field professionally is a way to help people over their fears. And that is why we brought educators, frankly, not because we want to debate the merits or other issues about bees. So you made the suggestion that we attempt to reach out to our neighborhood, and I thought that was a great idea, and we created a flyer. I have a copy of the flyer. We said, come learn about honeybees from experts, come see the hives, come ask your questions, express your concerns, come taste the honey. We accepted that as a challenge, as an opportunity to communicate with our neighbors. We also made individual phone calls, and some of you are here, and that's great, to our neighbors who we knew had expressed concern, the neighbors whose letter you read last time. We went and visited, and we did everything that we could think of to reach out to our neighbors. We had a nice meeting, we put out flyers, we put out posters, we sent out emails on the neighborhood list, and so we had a meeting. Dr. Wilson-Rich was there. It was a very educational experience. Councilman Mark McGovern was there. I know he did send you a letter. I think the meeting was appreciated, but all who were present as an opportunity to be educated about bees. Councilman McGovern also suggested that we find out what the neighbors felt, not only the neighbors who were having issues with bees, but also the neighbors who we hadn't heard from. So I sent out an email to the Cambridgeport list. I have over 40 letters. I'm not going to bore you by reading them, but I have them all right here, and the comments are highlighted, and I'm happy to pass them around. People saying they are happy to be listed in support. One person said, I'm highly allergic and yet I am highly in support of the bees. I'm in support. 100% of the letters I received expressed appreciation. So I just want you to know.
Do your letters address the zoning issue, these letters that you received?
These letters,
Do they address the zoning issue about the section 413 and the table of use?
these letters responded to your suggestion that we help the neighborhood learn about the bees.
I only asked that question because we don't even have to see the letters.
Okay, but they're here. I'm not gonna, they're here if you want them. So I just want you to know that we saw your suggestion as an opportunity to create relationships, to meet neighbors we hadn't perhaps met before, to have an open conversation about this. And I feel very proud of our community for really taking on this challenge and reaching out to the neighborhood. A number of people who had objected to the hives decided not to come to the meeting we held, and instead decided to hold a second meeting, and it was in a small venue, and I was given a limited number of people to invite to that meeting, so I wasn't able to invite the supporters. We did have that meeting on Tuesday night, and it was an opportunity for the neighbors to express, to describe anecdotally the experiences that they had had once we moved the bees in. And I'd like to think that we listened sympathetically. In fact, I apologized wholeheartedly for any discomfort that people had experienced from the bees. And the apiary inspector explained how we could utilize best practices to change the situation in the coming summer and year. So I think we came to that meeting with the hope that there would be a way to educate people to understand that these bees do not have to be in any way a nuisance. I did not leave that meeting with any sense that there was an interest in withdrawing the complaint. I will be frank with you, but I just want you to know that we did everything we possibly could to help people understand that these bees are a benefit to the neighborhood and not anything that anyone should be concerned about. So I think that's all I have to report. Do you have any questions?
No, I congratulate you on your outreach to the community. It's good. I've been better if it happened earlier, but it didn't. Any event, the complaint, as far as I know, has not been withdrawn. The case will go forward tonight.
So what happens now?
Well, you still have the opportunity to present your case, your counsel, and then we'll take it from there. Usually we would ask for comment, not usually, we will ask for comments from the audience, but per the rules I suggested earlier, I'm limited to the zoning issues. Then we would often read letters that we received that are in our files, but again, I do that only for comments that are relevant to the zoning issues, not the general. Because much of the correspondence we received in November, well, it broke down to two categories. Many letters, most of the letters were in support of beekeeping in Cambridge, but as a general proposition, because of societal benefits. And I've explained already that that's very well thought out, and sincere comments, and not relevant to us, or relevant to some other body that can adopt an ordinance to allow bees, subject to appropriate restrictions if the body decides that. We also had a number of letters, 3 to 5, opposed to your request for relief, claiming that the bees are hazardous to them, and also impedes with their ability to use their premises. And those are in the file. And again, like with the letters of support based upon the social utility of beekeeping, we've noted them, but that's not, again, the issue tonight. So I don't propose to read either set of letters. I just characterize them as I have. We received almost no letters post the hearing that we continued back in November. November wasn't it? We did a letter from Mr. McGovern, from the Council McGovern, that I mentioned, basically asking us to delay, I'll read the letter later on, but it's not to the merits, but as to how we should proceed. It was my hope when I suggested that we meet with the neighbors is that you would come to a resolution and any complaint for zoning enforcement would be withdrawn. To date, that has not happened, so I thought that would have the case tonight. But good for you that you did reach out to the neighbors, and good for you for educating the community as to what beekeeping is all about.
So would a conversation about the zoning issues pertain to the use of the building as an educational institute? I'm not quite sure how we should.
It's your case to make. I'm not gonna, you've got to persuade us. You've got to persuade us that the decision of Mr. O'Grady regarding section 4.13 in the table of uses was incorrect. If we find that it is incorrect, we will reverse his decision. We can maintain the Beehives. If we say it is not incorrect, that it is a correct decision, then the case will be over from our perspective. You will have recourse to the courts if you so choose, and you would also have the ability, and you always have the ability, to go to the city council and get effectively our case overturned by virtue of amending the ordinance to allow beekeeping, under whatever restrictions the city council wants to do. But that's out of our hands.
I find a confusion here. Confusion being that you refer to arguments only as to the decision itself, the legal issues. I raised, and the Board of Appeals requires that you stick to your arguments with your appeal. We raised a number of arguments, only started to speak to one, which was whether or not only the question of livestock, which was a question of, well, where does this come? How was this decision made? And the other issue there was that our argument that if the congregation's argument, the legal argument, that if it's not specifically permitted or denied, that it's therefore unregulated. It's possible.
But that's what the purpose of tonight's hearing.
That is correct. And there were some other arguments. Number one, this was a separate enforcement, selective enforcement, which didn't happen elsewhere. That there were other arguments that there are exclusions from religious or educational institutions. And I didn't go into the nuisance issue, but all this always happened.
On those two points, I'm sorry, I interrupted. We dealt with them at the last hearing.
Yeah, we're not going to raise them.
Okay, fine. Because I printed that they're not relevant to it.
We're not even interested, frankly, in the interpretation, as some of the board may want, whether or not if it's not specifically permitted, that it's allowed. That's an argument, maybe philosophical, or maybe go back to the courts or something. We're not going to go there. We did what you asked us to do, was just talk to the neighbors. At this point, the question for us is whether or not, in view of the history of Cambridge, in view of the experience of Cambridge, whether it's appropriate, may be appropriate under the existing zoning laws for these hives to continue to stay there. That's a decision, and that's a decision which the board has to take. The board will have to say whether or not they think that they're permitted or not, whether or not it's selective enforcement, whether or not these are all arguments. What we do with them afterwards, that's another question. But at the moment, we really want to be good neighbors. Our concern is that we really don't want to antagonize. And that doesn't mean there aren't always people who will object to some things that happen. Our concern at this moment is that there's not enough information about it, but that it may find some vocal objection to bees, which is really not warranted by the history or the facts of beekeeping. But I don't know whether or not it'll be coming. I wondered whether or not at this point we might change the agenda a little bit, and you could ask the people who are objectors to this to come first, and we would reserve the right to have yes.
No, I'm not going to do that. I don't want to put the people who expressed opposition have done so in writing.
Yeah.
In the file.
Yeah.
I don't need to put them on trial.
No, you don't want to do that.
Well, that's how they may feel. The fact of the matter is that what they feel is no longer relevant. What is relevant is a decision by the Inspectional Services Department based on a complaint received, which is why it's not selective enforcement. make that point again, so I keep referencing it. And I kept telling you that that's not the case. Case before us is what the ordinance provides and how we interpret the ordinance. And I'm willing to entertain, consider, I think all members are, any arguments regarding that, specific argument. But this is not the time to have a meeting about the birds and the bees. We've had 6 weeks. In November, we had the case. We had 6 weeks and you've done your best to educate the community, to get people involved, to understand all about beekeeping and the benefits and perhaps the risks. And the end result is a complaint still stands. The complaint has not been withdrawn, therefore we have to proceed with the case. Yes, sir.
Yeah,
You got a name and give your name to the...
Robert Goss, 9 Newton Street.
Spell that, please.
G-O-S-S,
Thank you.
N-E-W-T-O-N-N-I-N-E. My understanding, and I think the neighbor's understanding, was we were supposed to have a meeting between the people who complained and the people from the temple. The other event that they did was fine, but it was not what you asked us to do. We did have that meeting Tuesday night, and we have someone here to summarize the results of that meeting. And that was our understanding. We're going to come and do that tonight. So all this stuff is I think, superfluous to what we're supposed to be talking about right now. The legalese and those issues, you know. We don't want to hear that.
What you're saying is that, maybe you can give it directly, that after the results of the meeting that was held on Tuesday night, is that there are still complaints. The neighbors, those who complain, still want the complaints to continue, and they still expect the zoning inspectional services department to enforce those zoning ordinance. Is that correct?
We had a meeting and we talked. We had a doctor testify about some issues related to these things that can be fatal, you know, all the things we discussed at the first time. We have someone here with a summary of Tuesday night's meeting. That we did what you asked us to do. The other stuff was extra on your part, not what you asked us to do. That's why we had this two-group meeting. There were at least 30
Again,
people.
I'm trying to accelerate this probably
Yes.
fruitlessly there. All I want to know is the opposition to the beekeeping continuing amongst at least some neighbors. I see heads nodding yes. Indication there is still opposition.
Right. We have
Therefore, the
someone
efforts
here
to reach reconciliation, though well-founded and very assiduously pursued by the applicant, didn't result in any change of view by the people who are opposed. Therefore, I think the case goes forward. We did what we could, or you did what you could. We all tried. We can't reach agreement, and therefore let's proceed with the case. So, the floor is yours, Mr. Weiss.
Pardon me?
The floor is yours.
Can I ask Dr. Noah Wildenfist to...
Actually, I think it's not an issue about, I think frankly, the only grounds for our challenging the zoning rule as it's been defined, as I'm understanding now, would be that as a religious institution, we have some leeway, as a religious education institution, we have some leeway or some variance about the activities that we use our facility for. And on that basis, it might be appropriate to say that in fact, we are within our rights to have.
Is it your position or your advice to us that it's essential to have beekeeping to the practice of religious services at the temple?
Not essential.
Not essential.
Not essential, but a common custom.
If something can be done, there's a lot of things you can do as an adjunct to conducting your religious.
As a school.
It's same with schools. Same with a school. I mean, it's not an essential part of your curriculum, beekeeping, am I right?
I would say improving the environment is an essential part of the curriculum, and doing what we can to improve the environment would be an essential part of the curriculum. And the bee professionals here could testify as to whether beekeeping is an essential part of improving the environment better than I.
That's not what we're here for.
I've been monopolizing the floor every day. Also, my board wants to speak, please do I frankly think this is a fruitless pass to go down.
Okay.
This is a what?
A fruitless pass to go down.
Oh, well,
It's an essential part of the environment. It's as vague. Everything is essential part of the environment.
I understand. We have a witness here, a professional, an expert, who'd like to address any questions anybody may have.
That's not what we're here for. This is
Can I
precedent.
suggest, you want to have those questions, going to address them after the hearing's over, out in the hall or in the room behind. This is
We
not-
need
have
time.
We don't have time to take up
Okay.
our time as a board to do this. You've had 6 weeks to do this. And you
Well-
tried. I'm not in any way being critical.
My only question is that the objectors, you say they have not withdrawn their objection, obviously have specific reasons for objecting, other than the fact that, I would think so, either they fight or they do this or they do that. And I would like to be able to have someone address those questions.
You don't-
We did that last
We
time.
try to run the meeting. Sometimes they do a great job.
Sorry,
We're trying.
but this is great.
Their reasons are not relevant. Frankly, they may be misguided, they may be entirely wrong, but they have a right as a citizen to file a complaint with the Inspectional Services Department. And the Inspectional Services Department looks into the complaint, which it did, and rendered a decision. I don't want to get into the reasons why.
That's the difference, because my feeling is it's back to a policy for the Board of Zoning Appeals or the city or any board to make a policy based upon ignorance or fear.
We're not making a policy. You're not listening to what I said at the beginning. My point is we're interpreting an ordinance. How we got to the interpretation is through a complaint that was filed. Why the complaint was filed is irrelevant. The complaint was filed, a decision was rendered, and we're now passing on that. And the question before us is an interpretation of our ordinance. And our ordinance says, as I said once before, I'll say it again, if beekeeping is a use that's not identified in the table of uses, it's prohibited. Violates our zoning ordinance.
That's the interpretation of this.
Well, that's what this says now. The good rabbi made a suggestion that maybe you can fit under the permitted use for religious or education. I've given you I've expressed my skepticism about that. That only one person from this board.
We don't want to do that. That's a court decision you
Okay,
made.
you're not withdrawing that argument? Okay, then we have one argument you have that the decision is wrong.
That depends what the decision is of the board.
No. Mr. Grady decided that the maintaining of bees on these premises is prohibited under our zoning ordinance. So you're saying that's not true. You gotta give me, if you want to reverse the decision, want us to reverse the decision, you gotta give us an argument.
Well, the argument I'm giving you is twofold, severalfold. You have one that is basically not, it's not specifically prohibited, it's allowed. And number two, this is the active separate enforcement. But there are other issues as well. My question is, are basically telling me at this point that the board is not going to permit
Unless we can justify.
On the first argument, you're ignoring the statute. It says that no use, that any use that's not listed here is prohibited. That's pure and simple. And unless you can convince us that this use somehow fits, this beekeeping somehow fits under the uses that are identified here,
That's
you're
interpretation.
irrelevant.
Yeah. And I said, does that include gerbils, for example? Does that include, there are all kinds of things which are not specifically permitted, which continue. So, but we don't want to get there.
Okay.
And basically, I gather what you're telling me that the board is saying no because there's been still continued refusal to withdraw objection that the board is not going to do.
We are trying to give you, I'm trying to give you, I'll recognize you in a second. I've seen you. I'll recognize you. We're trying to conduct a hearing that consistent with our responsibilities and our rights as a zoning board. We interpret the zoning ordinance. And we're doing the best we can. The complaint was filed, decision was made by Inspectional Services, you've appealed it, we're considering that appeal. If you can't make an argument to us as to why, persuasive argument, to us, why the decision of the Inspectional Services Department was wrong, the decision will be upheld. Pure and simple.
So I think we should conclude.
I'll recognize you. You recognize me. Before you speak, this woman here has wanted to speak. I'll let you speak. One second. Yes, ma'am. Give your name and address.
Claude Rossman, Claude C-L A-U-D-E, Rossman, R-O-T-H-M-A-N, 88 Putnam Avenue, Cambridge. 41 Flag Street. My neighbors have beehives. I was stunned. And I discovered it on the internet, so I didn't even go to see them. What I don't understand is that if these people are allowed to have their beehives, does it mean they are allowed because nobody complained?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Or,
Let me finish. Let me interpret here.
let me finish, please.
All right, you're right. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Please. So, is it because nobody complained, or is it because there's nothing explicitly forbidding it, and consequently, it means that they are allowed to do it?
Let me explain. I made this point because you're touching on the selective enforcement issue that I keep hearing over and over again in passing.
Sorry,
Let me finish. I addressed this at the last hearing. I didn't think I had to address it again, but I will do it right now. You're absolutely correct. There are beekeeping being done all over the city of Cambridge. However, the long-standing policy of the Inspectional Services Department, not this board, the department, which is at the first level in charge of enforcing our ordinances, is that we enforce by complaint. If no one complains about something, the Inspectional Services Department does not take action to try to prohibit it. It doesn't want to seek violations. But if someone does complain, they will take action. They'll look into it, take appropriate action. This case here is the first instance that someone has complained to Inspectional Services Department about beekeeping. That's why a decision was reached, and that's why we're here tonight. As to all of these other beekeeping activities, if a neighbor or a citizen complains about those, I think you can expect the Inspectional Services Department will look into that and take appropriate action.
But your decision is going to apply to all the other beekeepers?
Technically, if we decide tonight that beekeeping violates our zoning ordinance, technically, every person who's maintaining bees in the city, beehives, is doing so in violation of our zoning ordinance. Well, let me tell you, a lot of things people do in this city are in violation of the zoning ordinance. I mean, and that is why, I'm going to try to be funny, that is why the Inspectional Services Department has the policy it does. They don't want to go out and be zoning police and seek out zoning violations and drag people down here. If the neighborhood has had no problem with what's going on, so be it. But finish, please. But if the neighborhood does have a problem, that's the case here, they will act. So it's not selective enforcement by any means. It is a philosophy of enforcement that is existing in Cambridge and has existed for some while. And speaking just personally, it's a wise policy. Cambridge is a diverse community, and if we went around trying to ferret out every zoning violation, God help us all. Certainly help this board. We'll be here for 24 hours every night.
May I offer something?
Go right in.
The bees are dormant at the moment.
That's correct.
And they won't be active until, in fact, maybe all dead with this weather. There was a suggestion made by a city council. And I would like to ask the board to consider postponing again any decision on this thing and to attempt to see whether or not the city council, at a meeting between now and the time when next spring would enact an ordinance relating to beekeeping, best practices, whatever, which would remove the question from the city from the standpoint of, and I think that's probably something that should happen at this point without lawsuit. Pardon me?
I'm sat here for 2 nights, and I'm saying that this really is, we just keep going around and around and around. You have laid out what is before us, and it is a very, very narrow parameter that we are operating in here as to whether or not Inspectional Services, with the support of the Commissioner and also the Law Department, interpreted the ordinance correctly.
Correct.
That's the only issue. It has nothing to do with whether or not we think it's a good idea or not. A very simple thing for a city councilor, or 9 city councilors to do would be to take this ordinance that Somerville has and put the city of Cambridge on it and bring it to a vote for the city council. And then you could all go, all the beekeeping, and that would be wonderful.
Mr. Sullivan, I'm not a Cambridge resident, but I vote for you.
And that would save us all coming out here night after night and saying things that we can't take back, getting emotional about it. There's a city councilor, all they have to do is to adopt this as a motion before on Monday night. Have it go before the ordinance committee, fast track it, enact it, and
I've
all
given
the blessing
this
of the
thought
world.
to you, I need to suggest this coming, that Mr. McGovern did what is right. And it strikes me you can go one of 2 ways. And I'm we could decide the case tonight, and it looks like we would decide to deny your appeal. But tomorrow morning, the Inspectional Service is not going to come padlock the temple doors. There'll be plenty of time.
Convert them.
The city council will have plenty of time to enact an ordinance, and it would be under some pressure to do that, because if they don't, the bees are gone. The other alternative is to defer this case, as we suggest, reasonable suggestion, for let's say a couple months to give the city council a chance to act. Cynic that I am, I suspect that was kicking the can down the road. And 2 months from now, we'll still be here because the city council will have not done anything, because there's no pressure on them to do anything.
But there will be a
So-
long
Wait
hearing.
a minute, that's my personal biased view. I'm going to ask the other members of the board to express their views. No, you've had an opportunity.
No, I have,
You know, I am the chairman of this meeting, not you.
no, that's
Okay, so
true.
you'll just,
That's true, but I
But-
am willing to withdraw the appeal, so don't you want to hear that?
you want to withdraw the appeal?
You want to hear what I want to say?
You're going to withdraw the appeal? Go ahead, then the case is mooted. Then you,
This is what I would like to
Yeah.
say. The last thing that I want is for this zoning board to vote on something that would have a negative impact on other beekeepers in Cambridge. And my concern is that if it did so, that would be putting other beekeepers who are endeavoring to benefit the environment at a disadvantage. And so it would be my preference, given that it's clear where this is going, to withdraw the appeal and in fact request that we have a period of time to get, we can't move the bees tomorrow. It may in fact be the case, but I'm prepared to take the bees off the roof. It's not worth it. I'm doing a good thing, people don't feel it's a good thing, or a few don't, most do. It's not worth it. I'm sorry, I think it's a loss for everyone, but it is simply not worth the aggravation. It's just not. And as much as it's a great thing and the kids love it and the community loves it, what am I going to do? So I'll get rid of the bees. But however, it may be in fact the case that an ordinance will be passed, and it may be that then we will have to revisit the issue of removing them if an ordinance is passed and I haven't yet removed them. But as of this point, I am certainly willing to withdraw the appeal.
your gracious withdrawal is going to be voted on momentarily, but if we do withdraw it and the ordinance is passed, there will be no, I can't see why, assuming what you're going to do applies with the ordinance, there's no reason for you to take the bees out. And as to doing it, you're not going, I don't think you're going to see Mr. O'Grady showing up at your doorstep at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning with a net over his head saying, get rid of the bees. There'll be an appropriate time for you to do it. And I would think, would suggest that given the fact that the bees are dormant now, the pressure to do this quicker is not as great. But the time will come when it will be great. So I'm going to take your suggestion of withdrawal, and I'm going to move that we accept the requested withdrawal by the petitioner. All those in favor of that? 5 in favor. The effect of this is that the decision of ISD stands. The beekeeping that takes place on Magazine Street is in violation of our zoning bylaws. And now the matter is out of our hands and is in capable hands of Mr. O'Grady and the ISD. Thank you very much.